I'll show you now how to put in a moon-shaped cutout, or any shape for that matter. I'm just choosing a moon because it's a traditional shape that is often on the door. So before you start, and I'll remind you again, you have to make this in the render engine cycles. The default is Eevee, and that's really fast and all and very nice, but it doesn't let you do transparency. So click the render engine and change it to cycles. And then if you hit Z and then check that this is in rendered. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to highlight the door or whatever object it is you're using. So under object mode, I can then select the door. If you're having trouble selecting the door, check that you're in object mode. I'm going to look under the UV editing. So here's my door shape, and it happens to be very tall, stretched looking, but that's okay. We'll just kind of keep that there for now. But if I want to put a moon here, that's going to cause a bit of a problem because of it's repeating. But I'm just going to check it against the wood, because what you can see in the background is the rust. So if I check what's open already, these are all my pictures that are open. Wood planks 0 to 8 color, that's what I'm actually using. And what we'll see here is there's actually going to be some repetition, and I'll show that by going back to rendered mode. And what I'm going to look for is some repeating knots in the door. And so if we look maybe at this part, we can see 2 knots. That one's slightly different, but repeating and repeating. And again, this large knot, and it's repeating down here again. So if I put a hole here, it's actually going to have a repetition on this part. So we may need to muck about with some of the shading and put on some mapping coordinates. So in this section, I'm going to put in mapping coordinates. Now, if you don't have this plugin going, so we'll go to Preferences, Edit Preferences, so click Edit, go to Preferences, and come down to Add-ons. In the search box, type Node, N-O-D-E, and tick the box Node Wrangler like it is there. And then, so if it's unticked, then you need to tick it. And that's basically it. And we're going to hit the red X. So clicking this image, Control and the letter T, and it's popped out this mapping node, and I want to apply the same map to everything. So I'm going to connect that down to here, and also click and drag and drop down to here. And I want to see what effect that's having, so I'm going to go to rendered mode. There we go, that seems to be working nicely, and I've only got one texture. Okay. Back to UV editing. This set of coordinates is called a UV, so I'm going to click the button that says UV, come down to the bottom, UV or export UV layout, give it a click. I'm then going to go to my desktop, and then Outhouse, and in here I'm going to put my UVs. So door, big tip here, put UV in the title and a number. If you have to do it again, you just sequential numbers 2, 3, 4, etc. But with the UV there, it helps to distinguish what the file is. So I'm going to export the UV layout. So this can now be used a little bit later on. Now personally, I can't draw very well in Photoshop, but I can do an okay job in Illustrator. So I'm going to start Photoshop and Illustrator because I'm going to be using those. I'll just wait patiently for them to start and edit the video so you don't have to waste your time. I'm going to create a new document, create new. The last thing I did was something for screens, so I should choose something that's set up for printing, so just a plain A4 piece of paper. And this is going to make a moon shape. cut out. And then I'm going to go create. So here's my plain document. So I'm going to start with a square, and to make it more obvious on screen, I'm going to change the white fill to blue. I might do it properly this time, blue, and click the blue. If you don't click there, it won't go, and then go OK. It's now blue. The outside, called the stroke, is currently black at one point. If I make that bigger, you'll see. You don't need to do that. It's just so that you can actually see that there is a stroke around the outside. I don't want that stroke, so when I click, looking on the left, I'm going to change it to none. It's a white square with a red line through it. So I click it, and then whatever thickness it was, it's now got no color. Next. Underneath the shape tool, I right click and out pops these other options. I'm going to choose an ellipse, otherwise known as a kind of looking like a circle. So I'm going to draw by pulling down. Holding down shift, then it constrains it to being a perfect circle. So then I drop, and again for contrast reasons I'll just make it a different color. The exact color doesn't matter. So I've now got a circle, and just in case yours doesn't, make sure that the stroke is none. I'm going to copy this, so selection tool, and you can either alt drag or option drag or copy and paste, whatever you like. So I've now got two circles. I'm going to subtract or minus with the Pathfinder tool the front circle from the back. So highlighting both those circles and nothing else, I'm going to use the Pathfinder tool. Now, depending on what your layout is like, I'm using right now Essentials Classic, but it's also visible in Essentials. You'll see over here where it says Pathfinder, but whichever you're in, Essentials or Essentials Classic. You could also find it by clicking Windows and coming down to Pathfinder, and that will pop up another window. So there it is, it'll pop up here. I also have it over here as well, whichever you're into. So anyway, I'm going to subtract this front circle from the back circle. So hovering over these, there we go, click to minus front. There we go. So I've now subtracted the front circle, and that leaves me with a moon shape. I'm going to repeat this idea, bringing the moon in front. Now you might see why I've got two different colors. I'm going to highlight those, and what I'm going to do is minus the front again. If yours, maybe you've drawn them in the wrong order, maybe you might need to right click an object with it highlighted first, of course, so start with it deselected. Left click, right click it now, and then choose arrange, and if you need to send that to back, then do so in order to see the moon in front. Anyway, highlight both of those and subtract the front. So essentially this is a blue rectangle with a hole cut in it. You could cut any hole. If I move it off to the side, you can see the white artboard and this other grey space around the outside. So essentially I've done the job, and you don't have to do this in Illustrator. It's just that my drawing is pretty bad and I can do a good job in Illustrator. So I'm going to save this, File, Save As. So we're looking in this Outhouse, and this is called Moon Shape Cutout Tutorial. I always like to put in a little number on the end so I don't get confused, and click Save. And then again remembering to click OK, otherwise it hasn't actually saved yet. I don't need this open anymore, but I'll just leave it open in the background. I'm going to come into Photoshop. I'm going to create a new document. I'm going to call this Moon Transparency. And the width and height should be square. I'm going to make mine 3072 by 3072, and then I'm going to go create. The reason I chose 3072 is most of the time I make things out of habit in 3K. So when I go UV export layout, Now this one is 3072 by 1536, so that's not ideal. Maybe I could make a different version, 3072, and then make this version 2. So I've got two versions to play with, but quite often when you're working with something like this, if you make the UV export the same size as the Photoshop document, it can save yourself a lot of hassle. Okay, so this document's called Moon Transparency. I should save it in case something crashes. So this is Moon Transparency PSD. So at least I've got a backup in case this crashes. Right, so we're going to be working with layers. So make sure you've got layers visible, and if you don't, you might want to go Window and come down to Layers. So this background layer is white, it's currently visible, and it's locked. I'm going to be creating new layers and adding new parts, so this icon next to the trash can is New Layer. You can name that if you want to, so I'm going to put parts in here. I'm going to start with File, Place Linked. Now I'm going to come to this folder and I'm going to use maybe the second one that I made, and then Place, so the second UV, and you'll see that this is the shape of my door. Excuse me. I'm going to leave it placed here rather than moving it around. This UV is here to give me guidance about where should I put the moon, otherwise I'll put it in the wrong place or the wrong size. So once I've placed it, I'm going to click the tick, and again looking down here, the layers, it's called Door UV02. It's taken the name from the file I brought in. Now I'm going to bring in Place Linked. I'm going to get the AI file, the Adobe Illustrator file, Moon Shape Cutout. And I'm going to go Place. And then OK. Now my job here is to put this moon shape, and I'm going to resize it, and I can't really see the door in the background, so I might adjust the layers so I can click and pull it down, so you'll now see the UV is in front of the moon. Try to get a sensible size. If you've got a massive moon cutout and huge small planks, it's kind of an impossibility, so try to get a sensible size to that moon. Now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 divisions running that way. That helps me to put the moon approximately in the right place. It's just trying to be a little bit jumpy at the moment. I won't fuss too much, otherwise this tutorial is going to get stupidly long. Okay, I'll just leave it there. Now, the next part's not that tricky, but it's very important. I need to get rid of this white background, so I can drag that and drop it in the trash can. The white background is now changed to this grey checkered background, and I also need to hide the door UV layout because I don't want that. I'm going to paint most of this layer this blue colour, but not the moon cutout. Push the letter I for eyedropper, or you can click it over here, and I'm going to get this blue colour. I now want to use the bucket tool, so this might be showing gradient, but underneath it, so it might be like this gradient tool. So you right click it and then choose what's underneath it, paint bucket tool, and I've got the blue there, so I want to drop it in, but I'm getting this warning symbol. If I click it, it's going to ask me, you must resaterize this. Just go OK, and it will resaterize. Now my mouse doesn't look like a little warning symbol, and hey presto, when I give it a click, it's now painted that whole area blue. This is really what we want. I want an area that's transparent, and that's going to tell Blender where to be transparent. One last technical part that's really important. It has to be saved as an image that allows transparency. PSD documents do, as do PNGs. So I'm going to change that to a PNG and click Save. So this is going to be Moon Transparency 01, because I like to number things, and Save. So if I have to do it again, and I made a mistake, maybe move the moon, make it bigger, smaller, then I would rename it 2, 3, 4, etc. So now back to Blender. So here we are, here's our door, and I want to put the moon right here. I'm going to come into shading. So now I want to mix this shader. So I'm going to try to make this as big as I can, so you can see as much as you can, but I also still want to see at least a little bit of that door. So I'll pop it up there. Okay, so I'm going to put in a mix shader. To add, you can either click the add button or Shift A, click search, and I go mix and choose mix shader. I'm also going to add in an image, so Shift A, search, image, texture. I'm going to open this document. So I go open, and here we go. This is Moon Transparency 01 PNG. And I go open. One of the reasons for a PNG is, you see, that's 50 kilobytes, whereas the PSD document is 471. Okay, so none of this is connected. What I want to do is I want to mix this. I want to get the transparency information. This channel alpha is short for alpha transparency, and that's going to be in charge of where it will be transparent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix this part down here as wood with Shift A, search, TRANS. Careful to choose transparent, not translucent. So this is going to be transparent, so that's going to be one of the colors, and this is going to be the other color, and that's going to connect down to there. So what's happening now is it's a mixture of, if I slide it all the way that way, it's very transparent. If I slide it all the way that way, it's now connected. What you'll notice is it's actually affecting the outside of the door, and part of that excuse me, is because this wood plank tutorial texture is actually used in two places. So what I would really like to do is make it only affect the door. So there we go, that's the wood plank tutorial. I'm going to make a new version, and I'm going to actually, it's used in two places, so what I can do is with this in edit mode, no object mode, I can hit the 2. It's now renamed it, and it's now no longer linked. So I'm going to rename that one to wood plank tutorial door with moon cutout. And these parts 1, 2, 3, they'll be floating around in the other version of it, but it's no longer got a 2, and it's not being used in those other places. So you can go and fix that if you wish to. So anyway, drop this mix shader in here, and that didn't automatically connect, but I'll make it connect. So now with this factor, I could slide it all the way to the right, and it's taking 100% from the wood. If I take it all the way to the left, it's 100% transparent, and I can see through. I don't want that applying to the entire door. I want it applying only where the moon is transparent. So instead of having this factor be the whole door, I take from the alpha, and I bring down and drop it here. And that should be, but currently, there it is. It's just a little bit small. And you can see it's a bit squashed looking. So what I might do is come back to Photoshop and bring that in front, zoom out. It is too squashed vertically. So maybe I might stretch it out. Can't at the moment because that's getting both, so if I hold down shift I'll stretch it this way. That's one way of doing it, and then I could go File, Save As. Do you want to apply? Yes, apply. And in this case I'm going to again change that to PNG, and I'm going to put in a number 2 there so I don't get confused. And go OK, back to Blender, and a number 2 there so I don't get confused. And go OK, back to Blender, and I'm going to open Moon Transparency 2. It's not quite as squashed. I'm not going to fuss too much about it for this tutorial. If I have a look and see under the animation, I hit play. There we go, so my door's open. I can see a hole through, and I can see right through that. So I can see a hole through, and I can see the edge of that sphere that I had glowing earlier, but clearly I don't have glowing right now. So if I go to that glowing sphere and investigate, right, let's make that glow. Plus, new, this is going to be glowing green. I'm going to change the surface from this principled BSDF, and I'm going to go to emission. That means to emit light or to give off light, and then the color is white. I'll change that to green, and it's now glowing. It's cut through the door a little bit, so GX, just pull it that way. But if I look, I can see light coming through that hole. It's also showing off enough light that it's making the inside of that glow. So I'm going to go back to my shading node. So that's what it looks like for the glowing material. But if I go to the door in object mode, you have to select an object mode and hit the door. So here are my wood textures. I've got, this is a mapping node which you can get by doing Control T, out she pops, and drag this down. If needed, you can change the scale and make the wood apply multiple times. But essentially that's the way we get our hole. Changing the height of the hole in Photoshop will adjust where it goes on the door. And if we come back and look through our camera, especially under animation, it's quite handy. It's basically done and ready to go. So the door itself doesn't have a hole in it. You can see over there in the model. It's all about the texturing, telling it where to be see-through. Eevee won't let it be see-through, so if you're having problems, so if I show you there, that's see-through. If I change the render engine from Cycles to Eevee, hopefully it doesn't crash, there we go. I've got no hole in the door, and that's green, but it's not glowing. So Eevee won't let you do that. It's one of the limitations. Also, you can see light getting in underneath the gap there, even though it's actually cutting right through the gap. There's no gap there, but light's getting under it. So Cycles will get a much higher quality, and it will allow surfaces to emit light